Thanks so much, Janet and Elena, for having us today as part of this webinar. It's great to share what we're doing with educators who are jazzed about teaching about climate change and excited to share about what we do and hopes that we can support what you all are already doing and how climate change connects to freshwater systems. And I'd say it's my honor to be carrying on these programs that Janet ran for so many years at the AWRI Resources Institute. It's really quite an exciting place to be and a joy to engage students in this way on our research vessels especially. But first, let me tell you a bit about what we do at AWRI. Our mission is to integrate research, education, and outreach to enhance and preserve freshwater resources. And so our mission areas kind of cluster around the research element, so what our research scientists are doing, the education aspect, and the outreach. We'll focus mostly on the outreach today since that's what Amanda and I run, but I'll tell you a bit about the other elements too. The Water Resources Institute is located in Muskegon, so we're right on the shore of Muskegon Lake, which is kind of the end of the Muskegon River and flows out into Lake Michigan. So we're really well positioned for research and education of these amazing freshwater systems. Our facilities include our Lake Michigan Center, which was built in 2001, another annex building, the field station, that has additional labs and office spaces, which was completed in 2013, and then a kind of large boat storage building that predates both of those. Our lab spaces range from chemistry labs to biology labs. There's some geospatial work that goes on. And you see here in our field station, we have a mesocosm facility, which I think is super interesting. If you think about like macrocosm being the big picture, microcosm being the tiny, tiny picture, mesocosm is somewhere in between and allows a lot of different possibilities for research. So the facilities we have for science research are pretty amazing and specialized towards water resources, of course. These are some of our scientists that do research at AWRI. Their subject focus ranges from aquatic ecology to fisheries to environmental toxicology and chemistry and molecular microbial ecology. So it's really quite a range of subject matter that our scientists are exploring all the time at AWRI, and I'm always learning something from them. Our graduate programs, there are two that we offer. One's a Master's of Science in biology that focuses on aquatic sciences, and one is a more water resource policy focused master's program that is a newer program. We also offer undergraduate internships for summer and fall, and we're actually accepting applications now for the summer internship. So any students that are listening, please check out this link. Applications are due in a couple of weeks in early March. So there's still time if you're interested in those. They're paid and they're really excellent opportunities to get hands-on experience working with our faculty doing aquatic science research. And we'll talk lots more about our research vessels as we get into the presentation, but we have these two larger boats, the Jackson, which is the bottom right, and the Angus, which is the top left, and then some smaller vessels as well that are used for research in other ways. So I'll turn it over to Amanda now to tell a little bit more about the history of how we got to be doing these programs at AWRI.
Sure. Thank you, Christina. So where we began back in 1965, there was a donation from DJ Angus, and he donated his 45-foot yacht to Grand Valley back when Grand Valley was just in its early years. And with this yacht, it was taken out onto the lakes with Professor Ron Ward at that time and biology students, and they would engage in water testing and using the boat for different classes. Then as time went on, the Water Resources Institute was officially formed in 1986, and there was a focus of attention on West Michigan and the importance of water, being surrounded by water in West Michigan. We were able to provide information and technical assistance to the area and assist in development of faculty research, and develop a laboratory. In 1986, a new Angus was acquired through a donation, and this the older yacht Angus was no longer seaworthy, and so the new Angus was brought on. It was retrofitted to become a education and research vessel. It was a little bit longer, could accommodate more individuals. And the first voyage went out in June of 1986, and you can see that in the picture there. Currently, it is docked in Grand Haven. A second research and education vessel was acquired in 1996 through donations. W.G. Jackson, William Jackson provided a substantial donation, so that's who the boat is named after, and it is docked in Muskegon at the Water Resources Institute. In 1997, the institute got a new name, the Annis Water Resources Institute, and it was named after Bob Annis for his substantial donations over time and contributions to the Water Resources Institute.
All right, thanks, Amanda. So that's kind of how we got to be doing this wonderful programming. So what do we actually do in the Education and Outreach program? So we have our Vessel Outreach Education program, which I'll talk about first, and then Amanda will talk a bit more about our K through 12 curriculum development, classroom programs, and educator workshops, as well as our role in Project WET. So the Vessel Education Program offers students the opportunity to serve as aquatic scientists themselves on board our two larger boats, the Jackson and the Angus. And since the program started, since we had the Angus starting back in 1986 and the Jackson in 96, we've had over 188,000 participants in our programs, which is pretty amazing to think of all those students from 4th grade through adults on our vessels experiencing the inland lakes and Lake Michigan and learning about these water resources. This map shows us all the counties from which groups have come to visit us over the years, as well as the different ports of call that the boats have visited over time. So there's 34 ports of call. So the little boat icons that you see around the shores of Lake Michigan are places that the boats have traveled to engage even more people in this learning. And yeah, all the colored counties are the reach across the state that we've had people visiting us from. This is a short video to just give you a little taste of what happens in our vessels, and I'll go into more detail after this, please.
Water Resources Institute.
I feel so excited for about 2 months from now when we get to be out on those boats again. So our program, the vessels actually serve 4th grade through 12th grade. Younger than 3rd grade is not allowed on the vessels. So these are some students on the deck and in the lab working. And we also we're more known for that work probably with the younger students, but we do have lots of college students, adults, and even public officials come out. So Senator Gary Peters is there at the bottom. He visited us this past summer. It was kind of fun. And we had a group of women scientists from the African Great Lakes make a visit earlier this year. I know Janet was on this cruise, but I don't see you in this picture, Janet. So those
I
are
took
some.
The picture.
You took the picture. I see. Okay, that's why you're not in it. So those are some of the more unique groups that we've had this past year, at least on the vessel. So it's open to any kind of group who wants to be aquatic scientists for a day. So when we're studying the lakes on one of our cruises, we're having the participants collect data and make observations about the inland lakes and Lake Michigan that we are sailing through. They are looking at various characteristics of the water, including physical characteristics like depth and clarity and turbidity, even the color of the water, as well as what the sediment on the bottom is composed of, and some ambient measurements like whether there's a lot of waves that day or what the air temperature is, the water temperature is. They're also looking at the chemical characteristics that are not things we can observe directly with our eyes. The pH, dissolved oxygen conductivity, and nutrients are the ones we always sample, and then additional ones for more advanced groups. And the biological characteristics of plankton, benthic organisms, and detritus, and the larger plants and animals that live there. And the curriculum is designed to illustrate the differences in trophic statuses of lakes. So these are your vocab words for this presentation. Oligotrophic lakes are tend to be deep and clear and cold and supportive of cold water fisheries, more sandy at the bottom. Mesotrophic ones have more nutrients, more organic matter, less clear, a little more cloudy, more diversity of aquatic organisms and plants. And eutrophic have even the most organic matter, the most plankton, abundant plant growth, turbid waters, the kind of lakes that one of our instructors, Paula, likes to say, if you stepped in and got your toes in the mucky bottom of the lake, you might say, ooh. So that's a good way to remember eutrophic lake. So all of these, one is not better than the other. We're designing our curriculum around this idea of illuminating how these different types of lakes function and how we can make observations about the lakes that we are looking at and make a claim about what type of conditions that lake would be experiencing that day when we're collecting the samples. So typically the students will divide into two groups. Half will be on the aft deck doing the more physical characteristic measurements. So some of the things you see here are at the bottom left, the student is using a Secchi disc that goes down into the water that helps us get a sense of the water clarity. The turbidity tube at the top left is another way that we look at water clarity by pouring water into a tube. One of the more fun jobs is when we send the ponar grab down to the bottom of the lake, grab some of the sediment and any critters that are living in or on it. And then the students get to pick through that sediment and see who might be living there and what type of sediment it is, whether it's sandy or mucky or some combination of those. One thing we tend to find in the more mesotrophic and eutrophic conditions are these bloodworms, which is always very exciting to see these wiggling bright red critters. And then some students get to help out as heroes on the hero platform in gathering water samples through these cool Van Dorn bottles, which the suction cups allow us to catch a sample at the top and at the bottom of the water column, so we can do our analysis and compare and contrast how the top and the bottom might have different characteristics. So the hero students get to help our deckhands out with collecting these on using the davit, which is pretty fun and special. Those water samples get analyzed by the students in the lab. So at the top here, some students are doing a titration to determine the amount of dissolved oxygen and therefore what life might be supported by the lake that they're looking at that day. There's also probes that are used to measure pH and conductivity, and they get to look at the plankton samples that come from the back deck also. Under the microscope to get a sense of the diversity of phyto and zooplankton that live in the water, as well as the density. So we see a really big difference between this top picture under the microscope is from Lake Michigan, much less dense plankton sample than the one down here from Muskegon Lake. So there's a lot more and more diverse kinds of plankton that we see in the mesotrophic and eutrophic lakes. And it's always exciting to see, just in like one tiny drop of water, how many different critters are swimming around in there. Once we've collected all these data and observations, we do some analysis, compare and contrast, and look at the data that we've gathered and make claims about whether the samples that we're looking at have oligotrophic characteristics, mesotrophic characteristics, or eutrophic characteristics, and what that means for the biological communities that live there. So that's a quick and dirty what we do with the science aspect of the cruises. Along the way, we're taking in all the unique elements of the place that we're sailing through, whether it's the industry that is happening on the banks of the lake, or some cool birds that might be flying around or roosting. The Silversides is something we go by, and it's always exciting to go through the channels and out onto the big lake and see the different things that are going on there. So we're also, in addition to the curriculum that we offer, being responsive to what's catching our attention and the things that we're seeing, and how those might be impacting the water quality that we're seeing and observing, for example. As far as how climate change factors into the vessel curriculum, I think it's certainly something that we're starting to incorporate, just thinking about with all these different parameters that we're gathering data about, how might those change as the climate changes, and what are the impacts to freshwater systems? Don't expect you to read all of this text here, but I just include this screenshot as something that we added to our instructor manual last year that just is like a starting point for conversation about how the different parameters we observe on the vessel could change in a warming world. So for example, pH could decrease or become more acidic. Since there's more CO2 in the atmosphere, more CO2 would be absorbed by the water bodies and be more acidic as a result. And then that would have some implications for critters that like to live in more basic waters, like many fish prefer. So that this is available on our website if that's something that's of interest to you to look more closely at. But freshwater systems are so complex and have evolved over so many years that, like many of our ecosystems, as the climate changes, there's lots of potential for those things to shift and become even like less predictable what the changes might be. So lots to talk about with regards to our curriculum and climate change. I will leave it there for now and pass it back to Amanda to talk about some of our landside programming and other elements.
To complement the vessel program, we have some landside programs, including work in the Robert B. Annis Educational Foundation classroom. This is located at the Lake Michigan Center. It's set up like a traditional school classroom, and it's filled with all kinds of fun hands-on activities related to water resources for students. We give students a chance to connect with the water cycle, their role in the watershed. They might look through a microscope or construct a 3D model. We are guided by the Next Gen Science Standards and Michigan Science Standards in the programming that we offer, and it's a lot of fun for students. Also, we have our outdoor classroom programming to complement as well. And like the indoor programming, it's all inquiry based. And with the outdoor programming, we try to really connect to the sense of place. So students are continuing their work being scientists as they were on the vessels, and they're looking at that interface between the land and the water. They participate using a lot of globe protocols and check out what's going on land, and they will run through some different simulations, they'll make models, and they'll use scientific equipment. In addition to the programming we have at the Lake Michigan Center, we also take our outreach to water festivals and different public events. Here are some fun pictures from different events throughout the years. So we've had science education days, we've gone to salmon festivals, water festivals with Project Wet, all kinds of different events where we can share information about our great water resources and connect students in the community with the work that we do. We also do curriculum development as a part of our outreach and education program. Here highlighted is some work that was done with MEECS, the Michigan Environmental Education Curriculum Support Units. And there was a grant for filming teachers, local teachers and local students implementing some of the different lessons. We held some of those filming days at the Water Resources Institute, and those turned into professional development that's available on PBS Learning Media for teachers to view and use in their classrooms. Also, Dr. Vale wrote lessons for groundswell related to watersheds and non-point source pollution. This is a series of 4 lessons, although lesson is really an understatement. They're really more of units, filled with tons of information and activities for students. These are geared more towards middle school, where students are able to experience a lot of connections to water resources through watersheds, nutrients and pathogens, and sediment as well. So some different resources that are available. We also house Michigan Project WET, which stands for Water Education Today. And the goal of Project WET is to facilitate and promote the awareness, appreciation, knowledge, and stewardship of water resources. And we primarily accomplish this through professional development that's offered to teachers. We have a network of facilitators across the state, and we offer different workshops, different trainings. One of our most popular trainings is using the K through 12 curriculum and activities guide. And this guide is interdisciplinary and offers teachers a way to incorporate that hands-on, minds-on science into their classroom. And thinking about AWRI outreach and education and climate change, there are 3 main ways that we connect students and educators with climate change data. So when students are on the boat, Christina demonstrated through the pictures some of the ways that students interact with collecting data. And we keep all that data. That data is useful. It's not just discarded at the end of a trip. It's been collected for decades. So we have about 4 decades worth of data that's been collected by students. So citizen science data that's available, and we can then use that if we like to look at change over time. We also use globe protocols in the classroom and on the vessel. And teachers can also use these globe protocols in their own classrooms. And these can be used to facilitate in creating those data sets on their own as well, and contributing to a data set that represents the entire world. I'll talk a little bit more about globe in a couple minutes. And then we also have the Muskegon Lake Buoy Observatory, and the buoy just finished up, I believe it's 12th season. So it's the beginning of a long-term data set where we're able to see the changes throughout the seasons of Muskegon Lake. You can see a picture of the buoy there at the bottom, and I'll talk more about that in a moment as well. So GLOBE stands for Global Learning and Observations to Benefit the Environment. It is sponsored by NASA. And the GLOBE program has a teacher's guide that includes a collection of different protocols, data collection protocols and activities that teachers can use. They're organized by Earth sphere. So for example, biosphere, pedosphere, and teachers are able to guide students through collecting data about their environment, their place. And so I have the website there if you're interested in learning more. It's a great way to contribute to international data set and to begin collecting some of those data sets for your own classroom and use. At the Water Resources Institute, we're lucky to have Dr. Vopi Bedanda. He heads up some ecological research focused on microbial ecology in the carbon cycle. And Dr. Bedanda has done some awesome projects, including some work on submerged sinkhole ecosystems in Lake Huron, microbial metabolism and the changing carbon balance in the Great Lakes, and the fate of terrestrial carbon in aquatic systems. And one of his key projects is the Muskegon Lake Buoy Observatory. And the buoy is located, you can see by the yellow dot there in the center, this is Muskegon Lake, so not too far out from AWRI. And the observatory, you see just the yellow buoy on the surface of Muskegon Lake, but actually there's a whole bunch of things going on underneath the water. So there's all kinds of different sensors that are measuring many of the same parameters we actually measure with students on the Jackson, including pH, turbidity, dissolved oxygen. But then the buoy also takes it a step further, measuring things we don't measure, such as chlorophyll and things like that. So there's real-time data available using the Muskegon Lake buoy when it is out for the season, and that data is always available on the AWRI website, and you can see an example page here of current conditions. So there's the sensors for air temperature and wind, rain, but then there's the water sensors as well, and those are located at different depths throughout the water column. One of the things that's really neat is that this has turned into a longer term data set with the 12 years of data available. And teachers can, or anyone, can take this data and graph and look at the changes over time, over seasons. And here are a couple of examples here. The blue and green line graph shows dissolved oxygen changes for the season from May through October. And so we're looking at dissolved oxygen and at the two different depths, so 2 meters and 11 meters. So it's interesting to look at how that changes throughout the summer. And then the other graph here shows water temperature compared with air temperature from May through November. And this is a scatter plot. So there's lots of different ways that you can graph the data. And it's a lot of fun for students to actually engage specifically using the data on their own using the website. And I think that wraps it up. So if anyone has any questions, we'd be happy to answer them. Here's our website again, gvsu.edu/WRI.